Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Just a reminder, tickets are still available for the conference and day passes are now available for $88 if you can't make it for the whole event. We'd love to see you there, even if it's only for a few days. Live stream passes are still available. We're trying to have an enhanced live stream experience this year with multiple camera angles and hopefully interactive where you guys can ask your own questions to some of the speakers if they allow questions. Hopefully that works out. But anyway, grab a live stream ticket. If you can't make it in person, all that information is available at journeytotruthcon.com. Tonight, we are joined by Jim Goodall. He is a retired Air Force sergeant?
Master Sergeant.
Master Sergeant. World-renowned expert on the SR-71 Blackbird, spy plane, the F-117 stealth fighter, and Area 51. So we're going to kind of get into the inside scoop of what's going on in the aerospace industry and some of his experiences over the years, including his relationship with Bob Lazar, John Lear, and Ben Rich. He has some incredible stories to tell. I'm excited to get into it. So welcome to the show, Jim.
I'm delighted to be here. It's going to be fun. The end of April is going to be more fun, though, I think.
Right. Yeah. Right. If you guys don't know, Jim and I will be on we're heading down to Belize to go explore some ancient ruins. We're pretty excited about it. So that's going to be really awesome. But before that, I want to get to know you a little better and ask you about some of your time in the industry. You're obviously an author also, and you've written plenty of books on the subject. But I'm most interested in your relationship with Bob Lazar, John Lear, Ben Rich, because you have some inside information, I guess you could say inside information on these guys and your relationship with them that not many other people have. And I didn't know if you wanted to kind of let us know how you found your way into this whole industry and how you got to meet these people.
Well, I guess the key to how I met, who I met, all starts with John Andrews. He was the plastic kit development director for testers. And through a mutual friend, Dave Menard, he's also an old retired master sergeant. He's long gone now. But John Andrews was preparing to do a 1/4-inch kit of the Blackbird, and he called the guys at the Air Force Museum. He talked to a dozen people, and every single one of them says you got to call Goodall. He has the skinny on what you're looking for. And we immediately became best of friends. And because of John Andrews, he said, well, I got to introduce you to a very dear friend of mine. This is like 1973. Oh, that's what, 60 years ago? And he said, no, that's 50 years ago, 50. Not 60. Yeah, that's new math. And he says, I think you'll enjoy him. His dad brought Learjet to the world. It's John Lear. So I became a confidant of John from 1973 on until his death last year. And I think he died March 30th of 2022.
It's been almost a year. Wow.
Yeah. And he was a character. That's the only way to describe John Lear. He was a one of a kind. He probably had more certificates for flying various aircraft and helicopters than probably anybody else. I think he was type rated in over 50 aircraft types, commercial, private, and some military. And he was born to fly. On his 16th birthday, he flew his dad's Learjet, Lear 23, with a FAI inspector on board. And he flew solo around the world on his 16th birthday. And he still holds those records today,
wow.
Which is pretty phenomenal. He flew for Air America subsidiary called Continental Air Service. He flew it's a Swedish type of short takeoff and landing aircraft, high wing, turboprop. And he would land on 600 to 700 foot runways that were cut into the top of a mountain. So if you undercut, you crashed into the mountain. If you overshot the runway or didn't stop in time, you go over the ends and down four canopies of Cambodian or jungle. And he said he's been shot at while he's done that. And a lot of times, depending where he was going, they would always fly with the right-hand side door removed. And sometimes he would come down just touching his wheels, and he would just shove the stuff out without stopping because he's being shot at. And then the pilots were not allowed to fly with weapons. All of them did. And if John was shot at, he'd take his aircraft and he'd fly around where the shots were coming to it. He had his beautiful 1911 45, and he'd just start bomb, 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 just shooting at them, throwing another magazine and just shoot some more. So he was a real buccaneer. There's only one person like John Lear on the planet, and he came and went.
Right, and he shared
because of my friendship with John Lear, I met Bob Lazar, and that's a fun story. And it all focuses around my love of spooky airplanes. I'm a UFO guy too, but I really my true focus and calling is snooping on our government, on in and around Area 51, trying to find out what they're flying today or what they're flying back in the day. And in November of 1988, the Air Force announced the existence of their stealth fighter, the F-117. And they weren't saying where it was flying out of. They had only one photo of it. It was shot from a tanker. It was backlit. They used a telephoto lens. So the image was all compressed. So early January, I call up John Lear and said, "Hey, I'm going to come into Vegas. Let's go see if we can find an F-117. So I said, sure. So I flew in. This, like I said, it's the first week of 1989. And we're heading up to Tonopah. And when you leave Las Vegas, you go up US 95. And about the halfway point between the two is a place called Scotty's Junction. What's famous about Scotty's Junction, it was a house of ill repute, also known as a whorehouse, that was taken over by the federal government because they hadn't paid their taxes. And they ran it out of business. I don't know how you can run a house of ill repute out of business, but the government managed to do that. But about 15 miles north of Scotty's Junction, an F-117 about 1,500 feet above the ground crossed the roadway at about a 45-degree angle, and about crashed the car. So we got up to Tonopah. We grabbed a quick bite. Then we headed east on US 6. You go down out about 14, 15 miles from Tonopah, and there's nothing out there. I mean, it's just barren. There's a big sign with a B-43 nuke on top. It says Tonopah Test Range. Turn down that road. It's 18 miles to the main gate of TTR. And I have, I'm a retired military, so I have, I have access to most bases, but TTR isn't one of them, and either is Area 51. But we headed down the road. We got to the main gate. And we decided we're going to go along the fence line. So we drive about 2 miles west along the fence line, and we're looking down on the entire complex. You can do that today, by the way. Anybody who wants to, who has a vehicle that they don't care if they get a little bit dusty or dirty. I won't take my car because it only has about this much ground clearance.
Sure. I'm going to stop you just for a second before you go on with the story. And I don't mean to be rude and interrupt, but you're with John Lear. You guys are going to explore this F-117. At this point, had he shared any information with you on what he believed the government had access to, or the technologies that the government was working with at that time? He shared everything with me over the years. He was pretty outrageous in a lot of areas. Sometimes I think he was overzealous with his ideas, his information, but he did share most everything with me. And he was talking about the underground facilities. I think for a fact that I had a chance to interview the former facility manager at Area 51, or a retired Blackbird pilot. And I asked him, are any underground facilities at Area 51? And he said, no, because if there were, I'd have been responsible for them. So he said, not to my knowledge. He said, we have the ability on the other side of the mountain, which is the Papoose Range. That's the backdrop to Area 51. They have the boring
machines there that can go through solid granite at 1 foot an hour and cut a 36-foot diameter hole. And
Wow.
they used that when they were digging down when we still did underground nuclear testing. They go down 1,500 feet, 3,000 feet, depending on the yield. They put the bomb down there. They put all sorts of test equipment, and they run all the cables up, fill the thing up with, I don't know if they use concrete or whatever, but they would fill that hole up. And then they would detonate. And you can go on YouTube and see them where you see the ground come up, and then it just goes down into a big dimple.
Right. So, I mean, so you don't believe that the Area 51 has underground levels? I mean, that's pretty much, I thought that was common knowledge across the board at this point.
According to the facility manager, no.
I mean,
but there's things out there he may not have been cleared to see,
right.
And it may be someone else's responsibility. S4 is cut into the side of the mountain. It's camouflaged. You can't see it from the ground. You can't see it from the air via satellite imaging or whatever. And when you dig a tunnel, when you dig an underground facility, you have a debris field somewhere. You have to put that dirt somewhere, and there has to be a road in and out. And again, the Air Force and the United States military has gotten really good at camouflage. So, the entrances and the roadways going into S4 may be really camouflaged where we can't see them.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. Yes.
So then you and John Lear were on the fence line looking down, and what did you guys witness?
Well, I looked to the north, and about 15, 18 miles north of us, I see a black fuzzy ball with a light on the bottom, and then a little bluish white fuzzy ball with a light on the bottom. I assumed that was the F-117 and a photo chase, which is typically a T-38 Talon. So this is before digital photography. Normally I shot Kodachrome, and that would take 7 to 10 days to get that processed and back to me. So I'm shooting color print film. I'm shooting Kodacolor. I have a Nikon with Nikon lenses. They don't get much better than that. And I'm watching it, as the F-117 is filling up my viewfinder, my body is starting to vibrate. I was like a 10 or 11-year-old boy seeing a naked woman for the first time. I mean, literally, I was trying to keep myself from vibrating, but it was just vibrating. And the 117 flew off and landed, and it was incredible. And I said, John, let's get out of here. We got to get back to Las Vegas in time so I can go to a photomat. Those of us that have white hair or gray hair, we know what photomats are. They were a little kiosk in the middle of a parking lot, usually in a shopping center. They were the same color as Kodak. They were yellow and that yellowish orange and red. And you can go in and drop off your film. You don't even have to get out of the car. You just drive up. It's like a barista now. That I think the coffee baristas have taken over those little shacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was going to be, a couple of days before I got the print film back. So I was kind of frustrated. So we head on out. We stopped a Little Alien in Rachel for a quick bite. And then we head to, back to Vegas. We know we're getting there after 9:00 when the photomats are closed. And we finally get to Lear's house. And he said, I have a new friend. He just moved up here from Albuquerque. He's interviewing for a job out in the desert. He hasn't gotten it yet, but he's had quite a few interviews. I think you'll like him. So about 15 minutes after we arrived in Vegas, knock on the door. Lear goes and answers the door. A young man comes in, very pleasant, nice looking guy, and introduces himself as Bob Lazar.
Wow.
And we're just talking airplanes and stuff like that. And I said, hey, I got some film that I'm frustrated. I can't wait till tomorrow so I can get the film processed. He said, what kind of film? I said, Kodacolor 100. He said, well, I have a processing unit at home. Let's go over to the west side of town where I live, and I'll process the film for you, and we'll print some up, see if there's anything worthwhile. So I said, great. So we told John we'd be back probably in about an hour. We jumped in Lazar's car, and we're about a block from Lear's house. And Lazar looks at me, she says, I feel sorry for that dumb son of a bitch Lear. I said, what do you mean? He said, he's from a world famous aviation family. He said, my God, his dad brought Learjet to the world. And this guy believes in UFOs. You got to be kidding. He says, I'm a nuclear physicist. If I can't prove it mathematically or put my hands on it, it doesn't exist. He said, you couldn't put a gun to my head to convince me that UFOs are real. Well, that was Bob Lazar's statement to me.
How ironic.
Before he was hired on at S4. His story has never changed. In 1989, 1990, he had I think it was a DEC, a mini computer in his house, because PCs at the time were not very good, not very fast, and had limited capabilities. And he had a NEMA enclosure, and it was filled with processors. I mean, it was 19-inch wide, it was a 24-inch deep and 6 foot tall. That was his computer back in 1989, 1990. And then shortly thereafter, I get up a year later, George Knapp has a guy named Jared silhouetted, altered the voice, talking about doing reverse engineering on alien spacecraft. And that was my introduction to Bob Lazar. And
he since changed his story. He believes in UFOs now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I've stayed true to my feelings about Bob. There's all sorts of speculation. Oh, he's a plant this and this and that. And he doesn't exist anywhere on federal records prior to 1989. That's when they made him a non-person.
Yeah.
And fast forward to Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And it's 1990. I'm there. I had 5 years active duty, a 10-year break, and then I had 21 years with the Minnesota Air Guard as a traditional weekender. But my company had been shut down by the French, and I was going through divorce. So I volunteered to go to Desert Shield and Desert Storm. I even volunteered to go to Saudi Arabia for a year. But I was at the Pentagon. I'm at Guard Bureau, and I have Bob Lazar's W-2 in my back pocket. And on this one particular day, I had absolutely nothing to do. There was a stand down or something going on in Saudi Arabia. So I decided I was going to see if I can find the location from the U.S. Navy that paid Bob Lazar and the name on the W-2. So I'm looking through the Pentagon directory, and I cannot find the specific Department of Navy that paid Bob. It's not listed anywhere in the Pentagon directory. So I decided. I think it was NCIS. I think it was Naval Investigative Services, or almost like the Navy JAG office. Found that office, and I said, "Well, I'll just see if they can tell me." So I go in there. At this particular point, I'm still a tech sergeant. I'm in my my blues. Not the full dress uniform, but my light blue shirt, dark blue pants. I go in, the doors open. I walk into this office. There's a young Lieutenant JG behind the desk, and I said, "Sir, can you tell me where this Department of the Navy is?" And I handed him Lazar's W-2. He looks at it and he says, "Sergeant, excuse me for a second." He gets up. He goes into the 2-Stars office. He's in there 20, 30 seconds, comes out, said, "The Admiral will see you now." Now, those of you who have been in the military, especially those of you maybe even the Navy, no 2-star admiral on just a hunch or whatever is going to talk to a puke Air Force / Air Guard enlisted person. So I go in there. I gave him a real sharp salute. Instead of saying "at ease," he said "parade rest." So I can tell he was irritated at me right then. And I'm standing there, and he's holding Lazar's W-2. He said, "Sergeant, I don't know where you got this, But if I see your face cross the threshold of my office ever again, you'll be the most sorry son of a bitch NCO in the United States military. Do you understand me, Sergeant? I said, yes, sir. And with that, he put Lazar's W-2 into the shredder.
Wow.
Said, you're dismissed. Now, Bob had been a plant. If Bob had been a phony, I would not have had this reaction from the 2-star.
Right.
He was pissed because I had something, a name of a Navy organization that the name is classified apparently, and that he was incredibly. He was angry at me. I mean, it wasn't, well, you shouldn't have this or whatever. What are you doing in my office? No, he was. I mean, his eyes were big. You could tell by his tone of voice and his facial expression. This 2-star was pissed at me.
Yeah.
Right.
And, when I got back to the section, I just scratched my head and I said, well, probably the only reason why I got the reaction that I did is that Bob Lazar's real. Now, he's real to me. He always has. And it goes on and on. The other thing another piece of the puzzle that people ignore, well, he's a plant. He's never done this. He's never done that. George Knapp, who I've known as long as I've known John Lear, so that's, over 50 years. George Knapp went to Albuquerque, where Lazar said he had worked. He worked at, I think it was Sandia. And he went to the Sandia library. It's there. There's two parts of it. There's the classified side and then the public side. And he's in there and he pulls out the telephone directory for Sandia Labs for the time that Bob said he was there, and opened up, and there's a Robert Lazar with the phone number that Bob said he had and the room number and the 2 guys in the same lab. George looked up those names and everything was consistent. Plus, Bob said that I made the front page of the lifestyle section of the Sandia newspaper. And there's a picture of Bob standing in front of his jet car. And it says, Sandia professor relaxes on weekends going 300 miles an hour in a quarter mile. And I've seen the jet car. It's
right.
So everything that I wasn't even looking for emphasized the fact that Bob is real. Bob is not a plant. Bob is who he says he is.
Right. Well, it would make sense that there would be a force in place trying to discredit him.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a very big part of the disinformation campaign is if someone's telling the truth and the government doesn't want that information out, well, let's destroy this person any way we can as far as his credibility.
Reputation, yeah.
Right. Well, one of the points a lot of the skeptics make that he's lying or he's fake is that they scrubbed all his records from the school he went to and everything. So they're like, oh, he never went to that school. He's lying. It's like, no, they scrubbed his information because he's real. That's why they did that, not because he's lying. And then 2, I remember him saying the whole reason he even went public is because he was scared for his life because they were already starting to kind of come after him. And he's like, well, I got to come out fully publicly now. Otherwise, they can kill me and this information dies with me. And
they had called him and they wanted, the security people wanted to talk to him. But they said, we'll meet you out at Indian Springs, which is now Creech Air Force Base. It's about 30 miles outside of Las Vegas on US 95. And Bob said he went out there for the interview and he's sitting in the car with him. They pulled guns on him. And threatened to shoot him. And I think that's when Bob said, look, this life is too short. I'm not going to, allow this to happen.
Right.
So that's when he decided to go. That's when he decided to go public. And because he knew Lear, he inquired who would you recommend that I go to as far as major media, and it was George Knapp. because George and John had been, friends for forever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
Both John and his wife Mary Lee were real big in Las Vegas movies and TV stuff. And John has been just a celebrity because he's John Lear,
right?
And he put his money where his mouth is. He was when he was the chief pilot for American Transair. This is John Lear. Some journalist down in Houston called him up, or cornered him, one of the two, and he said, "I don't like the fact that you're a person in a position of authority. You're the senior captain and the lead pilot for American Transair, and you believe in UFOs. And if you keep this up, I'm gonna start a campaign to destroy you." This is a journalist. This is one of our, those that want to journey into the truth, and
right.
They didn't want the truth. No. So John met with the president of American Transair. This is in Indianapolis. And the president said, "John, all you have to just tell me," he says, "you won't do this anymore, and we'll just leave it at that." John said, I can't do that. So he turned his back on probably a $400,000 a year job because it went against his best interest. I mean, his interest was, to make sure the public know about UFOs, alien encounters, and whatever. When he got home, he told Mary Lee that, "Hey, I just lost my job at ATA," and he had to go somewhere else. When he came back, she had emptied out his office. Now, those of you who've never seen John Lear's study or his office, this is about a 20 by 20 foot room. You couldn't put any more photos on the walls or any more books on the bookshelf. And everything had to do with UFOs, with his time in Southeast Asia and aviation. And I'm proud to say that the largest part of the wall space was taken up by photos that I'd given John. So. But he came home and all his filing cabinets are gone, everything's gone. And Mary Lee said, "I've changed the numbers for the house. All the phone numbers are changed, and you're not allowed to give them out to anybody unless I approve," because he was getting calls from all sorts of crackpots all over the planet. And Mary Lee liked me, so my name was on the list of approved people that John can give his phone number to. But he put his money where his mouth is, and he really felt that he had it was his job to make sure that this information is brought forward.
And he did that until the day he died too. I mean,
absolutely. Now, he said a lot of outrageous things, but considering what some of the stuff that's going on around the world and underground facilities and whatever, maybe he wasn't so outrageous after all.
Mm-hmm.
But I miss not talking to John.
Right.
But he's also a prankster. You don't know if he's pulling your leg or whatever. And I mean, a couple of times I had been at Rachel, and I had borrowed his 4-wheel drive pickup, and I was sleeping in it near the fence line of Area 51, and a pavhawk came through and almost landed on top of the car, and the turbulence ripped off a couple of his antennas, which I wasn't aware of. So he came and says, I mean, he was pissed. He's jumping up and down. He's almost foaming at the mouth that I screwed up his truck and whatever. And I'm feeling really, really bad. And all of a sudden, I see this twinkle in his eye. I said, "Larry, you son of a bitch," he said, you're pulling one on me. And he starts laughing. He had a great laugh. And that was John Lear. And that's the John Lear that I knew.
Right.
And I covered 3 or 4. He had some very specific groups that really didn't mingle into any of these other groups. The exception was me. I was both in the aviation side, my love of the desert, spooky airplanes, UFOs, and whatever. And so I covered a lot of his area of interest, and I think it's why we our friendship blossomed like it did.
Yeah, that's great.
And one of his very, very dear friends was John Andrews from Testers, and they went back, to the 60s. And when John Andrews died, he had asked me. He said, "When I die, could you take my ashes and make sure they're dumped in, over Area 51?" And merely he'd also told John Lear the same thing, and Merrily had cleared it with the cremator that I wanted in equally in two containers. So at his memorial service in San Diego, Merrily gave me John's ashes. We drove back up. This was on a Wednesday. We drove back up to Las Vegas from San Diego. And then Lear says, "Well, I rented a Jetstar helicopter there at McCarran, and we're gonna fly to the north end of Area 51, and we're gonna make sure John's ashes are spread all over Area 51." So next day we're out at McCarran. John was certified to fly the Jetstar, but he wanted to have an instructor pilot fly. Just it removes the liability claims if something had gone wrong. And as we're heading towards, we took off McCarran. We're sort of going up 15 in the helicopter, and just past Nellis, heading north, and before you get to Apex, there's a real sharp ridge line, and the wind is howling. And as we go over that ridge line, we were bouncing all over the place. We didn't go inverted, but we were sideways a couple of times. And I'm kind of concerned. And I look at Lear and I look at the pilot, and they're just sitting there like there's nothing to be concerned about. I said, "Well, if they're not concerned, then I'm not." And we're about halfway there, or maybe 2/3 of the way there. And John says, "I got to go to the bathroom." And the pilot says, "I got to pee too." So we landed out in the middle of the desert. There's 3 guys out there watering the cactus. And then we took off. And as soon as we got over Hancock Summit, and that's the summit, you go down in Tippecanoe Valley, and that's where you can see the back road to Area 51. As soon as we came over that ridge line, they launched a Beech, was it 1900? It's the Air Guard used them for VIP transport and just a hack airplane. But this aircraft took off from Area 51 and started following us, and we head up 375, and then when we got to just before we got to Rachel, there's a road going out to the bombing range. They call it 10-mile road. So we head down that way, and then you could see where the fence line is of Area 51. You can see the tracks where they patrol it all the time. So we're sitting up there. We're about 1,500 feet above, about 3,000 feet above ground level. The wind is howling. We're sitting there. We're being buffeted. And John gets on the radio, and he knows the frequency that they monitor at Area 51. And he says, "Dreamland, Dreamland." This is John Lear and Jim Goodall announcing that John Andrews is on final approach to runway 14 left. With that, I opened up the slider, put my hand out, dumped his ashes. They went down. As soon as they hit the 30-mile-an-hour north wind, it just went straight into Area 51. So John's ashes are scattered all over the place.
That's a great story.
And we had a military escort with the Beech flying around us, and then we headed back, and the Beech back into Area 51. So it was.
No,
the reason I'm where I'm at today is because of John Andrews, and that was just a fitting tribute to my friendship with him and my friendship with Lear.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, from my understanding, you had a relationship with Ben Rich as well, the CEO, former CEO of Lockheed Skunk Works. What was that relationship? And because I'm sure you're familiar with his quote, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do it." Did he share anything that pertained to that with you while you were friends with him?
Yeah, we talked once a quarter for 25 years. I don't know how I got onto his list. of favorite people. But if I didn't call him, he would call me. And we would just chat. There were times when I called him, he'd put me on speakerphone. His secretary, June, would recognize my voice. Mr. Rich's office. Hi there. Oh, Mr. Goodall. So just a second, I'll connect you with Ben, or connect you with Mr. Rich. He put me on speakerphone. I can tell there's a half a dozen people in his office, and we're just sitting there shooting the breeze. And it just went on that way for up until he died. And in August of, our friendship was so cemented so well that in August of '89, Ben called me at home, and he said, "Jim," I says, "I have it from the horse's mouth." He says, "The Blackbirds are not going to make it through Congress, and if anybody can scrounge one, it's you." So, okay. So I went to my boss, Major General Al Schwab, and I said, "General Schwab, I think I want to get a Blackbird for our museum." He just laughed at me. I said, "Sir, rather than saying no, why didn't you give me the opportunity to fail?" And he said, "All right, Smarty, how are you going to get it here? Because the ones that are available for museums, they don't fly." So I said, "I already have that covered." He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, I called the Adjutant General of the state of New York, General Weaver, and I called his office, and the secretary answered the phone, General Weaver's office. I said, 'This is Sergeant Goodall with the 133rd. That's the 133rd Airlift Wing in Minneapolis.' He says, 'Is General Weaver available?' 'Just a minute, Sergeant, I'll put you through.' So General Weaver gets on the phone, and we're chatting away, and I said, 'Sir, I have a proposition for the New York Air Guard.' He said, 'What's that, Sergeant?' I said, 'How would the New York Air Guard like to move the world's fastest airplane in a couple of your C-5s?' And he said, he's quiet for about 10 or 15 seconds. He said, 'You mean the Blackbird?' I said, 'Yes, sir.' He said, 'When you're ready, you call, we'll haul.' So I told General Schwab, I have that covered. And they did when we got the letter from the Air Force Museum. The other thing I managed to do, which has never happened before or since, is I got the entire Minnesota congressional delegation, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, all to agree to sign the letter that the Minnesota Air Guard Museum should get the Blackbird, or a Blackbird, because of the involvement of Honeywell. Honeywell had all the electronics, the autopilot, the stabilization augmentation system, inlet control system. That was all from Honeywell. 3M provided a lot of the flexible circuits and adhesive used on the Blackbird. Rosemont built and manufactured the static pitot system. And 5 of the original A-12 pilots learned how to fly or flew with their respective Air Guard locations.
So you got the Blackbird to the museum, though. That's great.
Right. And the thing about it, we got the 8th production A-12. It's a single place. They fly higher and a little bit faster than the SR. And my claim to fame when we recovered them in October of '91. I took a C-130 with 18,000 pounds of equipment and 12 other guys, and we flew to Palmdale. And in 2.5 days, we took the outer wings and engine nacelles off of the A-12 Blackbird number 128. And then we left and came back, 10 days later, and we had the C-5 there ready to load. We had 1.5 inches of clearance on the floorboard with the guardrail. The floor rails. We could have torqued the landing gear in some if we had a problem, but it fit. So on the 27th of October, 1991, we load the A-12 Blackbird into a New York Air Guard C-5. They don't have fuel available at Palmdale, so we had to go up to Travis. We spent the night there. Next morning, we took off. We're heading to Minneapolis, and we're about 45 minutes out. And the chief, it was an E9, was going to go down and check the load. I said, can I go with you? I said, normally the answer would be no, but since this is your project from beginning to end, of course, come down. So I went down, I climbed up in the landing gear, walked along the chines, opened up the canopy that had blocked open with a wheel chock. And I had a 5-gallon bucket in there with a cushion. The seat was all the way down. I went in there and closed the canopy. I was in there for about 45 minutes, just hammering the air in a Blackbird. And then finally he rapped in the bottom, say, hey, we got to go back up. So I went back up. And then about 40 minutes before we're supposed to land, Chief comes back to me. He said, the boss said you can be in the cockpit when we land. So I'm in the front part of the C-5. The back part is troop carrier. They have 75 seats behind the wing box. I'm on the front section. He said, no, downstairs. So I called Ben Rich the next day. And I said, Ben, I think I've done something with the Blackbird that absolutely no one else on the planet can say they've done, and probably will never. I'm the only person who will ever be able to do that because rules change. But I'm the only person in the world to have been in the Blackbird cockpit of a Blackbird at 33,000 feet at Mach 0.72 inside another airplane.
That's amazing.
That was the boss that just came, hey, babe, you want to wave? Yeah, okay.
Right. That's amazing. How's it going?
Yeah. Good.
So you mentioned off air that you were trying to interview Ben Rich, but that never happened. So can you explain what happened with that?
Well, he had to wait till he retired, and he was doing a lot of things. He said, I need get my book finished with Leo Janos. And it was My Time at the Skunk Works by Ben Rich, and actually done by Leo Janos. And by the time that happened, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had esophageal cancer. And we just ran out of time. Michael Schratt, who's also a longtime friend of mine, has the original letter that copy that Ben wrote to me saying that, yeah, I will be a no-holds-barred interview, but I have to wait for the book to be finished. And he had the nerve to die on me before. But the last thing, my last conversation with Ben Rich, he was at USC Medical Center. It was about 10 days before he died. And I call him up, and he said, and we were talking about John Andrews and John Lear and a bunch of other people. And finally, near the end of, it was about almost an hour-long conversation. I could tell he was weak. He said, Jim, we have things out in the desert. And he wasn't referring to Area 51. He said, we have things out in the desert that's 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. Not what you think you can make in 50 years, but what you can comprehend. And I can comprehend a hell of a lot. They said, if you see movies like Star Trek or Star Wars, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. I said, Ben, you want to expand upon that? He said, no. And then he had the nerve to die on me 10 days later. So, wow. But his statement at UCLA, basically saying, we have the ability to take ET home, but our government won't allow that information to be made public. And that's infuriating. And
yep.
And that's why I've always been a pain in the ass to our government, because I snoop. I mean, when General Roman, who was my wing commander, he was at a general conference in the late 80s. And it was all the generals from the Air Guard, the Air Force Reserve, and active duty. And he was there. It was about a 10-day gathering. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was General John Vesey. He's from Minnesota. He grew up on Lake Mille Lacs in central part of the state. And General Broman was chatting with General Vesey. This is midway through the conference, and he said, we get a big kick out of your Sergeant Goodall. You know, some of the all of us senior officers really think what he does makes the Air Force look good, and referring to my books and whatever. I said, but there's a few of the younger officers we'd like to have them whacked. But we've given your Sergeant Goodall a nickname. We refer to him as Agent Orange, and that's been my nickname given to me by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General John Vesey. And it just cracks me up. I mean, when I was on the fence line at Tonopah Test Range with John Lair, this is 96. So we're fast forwarding to 96. Tonopah Test Range is now in caretaker status, allegedly. And we're out there. It's at night. It's about 11 o'clock at night. Lair and I are out there in our lawn chairs. You don't want to sit on the ground because there's scorpions and bugs and whatever. And we have night vision goggles on. And we look and we see 3 armored personnel carriers coming, one from the west, one from the east, one coming up from the south. And I stand out and yell real loud, "Hey, we're good guys, we're taxpayers." And all of a sudden we have floodlights on us. John has 3 little red dots on his chest. I have 3 little red dots on my chest. And we see a vehicle had come down the public land side, or BLM, but Bureau of Land Management, not the other BLM. Comes around John's pickup truck. He has his hand on his Beretta, his 9mm. He said, "You're in a restricted area. I'm ordering you to leave." And I said, "Sir, I don't know who you are, but we're in public lands, and I don't need your permission to be here." He said, "I said you're in a restricted area, and I'm ordering you to leave right now." And I pulled out an aeronautical map issued by the federal government that gives the longitude and latitude to the second of restricted areas. Mm-hmm. And I said, according to this map, I'm on public lands. And if you look at the base of that fence post that my friend has his feet up on the barbed wire, you'll find a USGS medallion. We're in public lands, and I can be here for 15 consecutive days without your permission, or anybody's permission for that matter. I want to see some ID. And I said, "Who are you?" So I'm Captain so-and-so with ASI, and it stood for Advanced Security, Inc., contract security. I said, "You're a rent-a-cop. You don't have any jurisdiction on this side of the fence." And you can just see his jaws just tighten up. He says, "I told you I want to see some ID." He says, I've been deputized by by Lincoln, Esmeralda, and Nye County to uphold the laws of the federal government in the state of Nevada." I said, "Good for you." So I tell you what, you show me yours, I'll show you mine. So he hands me his ASI badge. I said, "Sir, that's not a valid form of ID. I need something issued by the state or federal government." And he's getting more and more pissed. So he hands me his Nevada driver's license. I don't have my reading glasses on. So, okay, fine. So I'm living in Minnesota at the time. Larry is, living on Hollywood Boulevard in Las Vegas. And he pulls out his driver's license, and I pull out mine and hand it to the guy. He hands it to a guy on the south side of the fence, walks over to one of the APCs, armored personnel carriers, had to be the supervisor. Hands him the driver's license. The guy turns the lights on inside the APC, ACP, and he said, I can hear him say, "Oh shit, it's Goodall and Lear." The lights went off, the red dots went away, and they just dispersed. But we knew that since we were found and they knew us there, they weren't going to do anything. And it's kind of heartwarming that they knew who we were.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's what I do. That's what I do for fun. And I've been to the fence line at TTR and Area 51 over 80 times in the last 45 years. It gets a little bit more difficult because I used to have a car that I could drive anywhere and not worry about it. I have a Grand Sport Corvette, and I have about this much clearance, in the front, so it would tear everything apart. And my tires are too expensive. You hit something, puncture a tire, 150 miles from nowhere.
Right.
You don't want to do something stupid like that.
Sure. So, I noticed you were in the documentary Secret Space UFOs, The Rise of the TR-3B. It was a Darcy Weir documentary. Yeah. And so what, are you familiar with the TR-3B and its capabilities? Have you experienced anything surrounding that?
No, I've seen the TR-3A. It's built by Teledyne Ryan. It was only about maybe 3.5, 4 feet wingspan, and they were flight testing it out, off one of the dry lake beds somewhere in Southern California. The TR-3B, which has been seen all over the planet, if it has FAA required red and green lights on it, then it's man-made. So we don't know, when I say we, those of us, in this community, we don't know if it's ours, if it's theirs, or if it's another, if it's Russians. I don't think the Russians or the Chinese, they're good at stealing information, but not so much, breaking barriers and learning how to do things that we don't know how to do.
Right. Now, do you think, I witnessed one personally last March 2nd of last year, fly right over my house, actually. It's completely silent. It did not have the red and green lights on it. Do you think, what kind of, I guess, do you monitor any of the secret programs that the government might be operating behind the scenes?
I try to, I have a lot of friends. I've lost a lot of them over the years. I was in the group of people that I hung with that were really into spooky airplanes, the Area 51 and things that go bump in the night. I was the youngest of all of them. And, on Monday, I hit 78. So a lot of these guys were in their 80s and 90s and have expired. John being one of them. He was going to be 80 this year, but he didn't make it. So I try to keep my ear to the ground. For 4 years when I lived in Hawaii, I didn't do anything. When it was too time consuming, excuse me, to fly for 5.5, 6 hours just to start my trip. Landed in LA after 6 hours, then I had to, either going off to Minnesota, go to Vegas, go wherever. So I just didn't do that. So I was more or less out of communications, so to speak, for those 4 years that I was the associate curator at the Pacific Aviation Museum in Pearl Harbor. And that was my fun job. That was the most fun I've ever had. I was being the curator. I went around and acquired airplanes all over the place. I was responsible for the restoration of the aircraft we had there at the museum. And I quadrupled the amount of aircraft that were on display there. And I'm proud to be part of it. And I was with Museum of Flight before that. I had 10 years with them. And I'm one of the founding members of the Minnesota Air Guard Museum, where we had our A-12. And it was absconded with. I even made the front page of the Wall Street Journal fighting the Air Force Museum taking the airplane. Because it was he said, well, we're taking it because it doesn't have ready access for the general public to see it. So where did they put it? Oh, let's put it at headquarters of CIA, where nobody from the general public will have a chance to see it, not occasionally. So I made my likeness is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, but under the fold. And then the whole big article, the addition, the remainder of the articles on, I think page 9. But I made the front page of the Wall Street Journal 3 times.
That's great.
I'm very proud of that. And all had related to spooky airplanes and or Area 51.
Now, what kind of, I guess, top secret black programs do you think that the government has based on your research?
Well, I know for a fact, and this is 30 years ago, that at that time there were 16 black programs that the Air Force was looking at possibly declassifying. Of the 16, only 4 were manned. The other 12 were unmanned. So it's funny unmanned aerial vehicles for various purposes. But the manned programs, he said, 2 of them are experimental, and two of them are operational. One of the operational aircraft, and this is from a chief master sergeant who was in security at Area 51 off and on for 10 years. He said that he was called in to secure a hangar at Area 51 because something came in at night. His team was ordered to secure the location, make sure no one came out, and it left the following night. And it was the Mike was his first name. He said it looked just like the General Dynamics McDonnell Douglas A-12 Avenger 2, the flying Dorito. And guys had General Dynamics or I think it was McDonnell Douglas overalls on, coveralls. But apparently the Navy A-12 never flew. But there was an Air Force version of one of their prototypes, and I think it's referred to as the A-11. And we don't know what happened with that or where it's at. But Mike, the guy from OSI, or not from OSI, from the security, he ended up going to, he changed his station. He went to Bowling Air Force Base in D.C., working with, working out of the Office and Special Investigation, OSI. And I've lost track of him because I really wanted to nail him down after he retired so he could really spill his guts. Mm-hmm. But that didn't happen. But I think I have an opportunity to talk to someone probably later on this spring that spent a lot of time at the place that doesn't exist, also known as Area 51. And and I hope to learn more from him. He said he won't talk about UFOs, but he'll talk about anything else that flies out of Area 51.
Well, you have to share that with us when it comes time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Going back to the TR-3A that you mentioned you saw test flight, what type of technology was that flying? I mean, was it anti-gravitics? What type of propulsion?
That was just it was a model airplane engine. I mean, it was propeller driven, and it was just, it was testing the shape and the maneuverability and whatever. Again, any UFO or anything unknown that you see up in the sky, day or night, if it has your FAA required position lights on the wingtips and or landing lights or whatever, it's more than likely man-made.
Right.
And Lazar said that there were nine different craft at his when he was at S4, and they were all different shapes. They were all different. I mean, every type of configuration, limited to 9 that you could think of. He saw on one particular day when all the interconnecting doors were open.
Okay.
So
we're talking.
Because of the fact that I didn't do anything for 4 years, it was kind of hard to get back into it. And a lot of my friends that I was pretty close to had passed away. I mean, in 2014, I think I lost one every 3 weeks for the averaged out over the year of 2014 of dying primarily because of old age or illness, cancer and stuff like that. So,
well, we hope you got quite a few years left in you.
Oh yeah. I have a feeling I'm gonna live to be at least 105.
Perfect.
My mom's side of the family, my mom was 100% Sicilian. I lost her on Mother's Day a long time ago, but I'm laser focused when it comes to digging into stuff. I don't take no for an answer. And when someone says no, that's when the sales job begins. And that's when the digging begins. And I've been really, really good into that. So.
Right. Well, we need people like you that are going to be a thorn in the side for the government, because some of the stuff they're doing, maybe it's not even illegal or legal. So,
security, the way security is in the federal government, most of security is to hide funds. The bean counters, the ones that destroy corporations because they're so narrowly focused on immediate return on investment and such. They're killing industry, they're killing innovation, and that's what that's the problem we're running into today. And when I was doing what I was doing, I had there was a group of us. It was about 10 of us, and we referred to ourselves as the Dreamland Interceptors. Probably the most prestigious guy we had in there was Michael Dornheim. He was the senior writer for Aviation Week. We had a guy named Agent X. He put on a on a sniper suit. They look like a tumbleweed, and he crawled into Area 51 and got within about 150 yards of the runway.
Wow!
He said it was a 4-day trip to go in and come back out, because they have sensors out there that can sense noises. There's all sorts of stuff out there, and they do.
He did a slow enough crawl with a disguised as a tumbleweed.
He had a sniper's suit on.
Okay.
So I mean, I could go out in the backyard, behind the fence here in the desert, and just curl up into a ball in a sniper suit, and you could be looking for me all day long and walk right by me and never know it. He said he had people walking. He said there was a maintenance team or someone doing something with the runway lights. It's only about 150 feet from him. And he said later, so the hardest part was going to the bathroom. And, of course, he had to bring enough water with him. It wasn't so much the food, but he had energy bars and whatever. I said, would you do it again? He said, no. my nervous system couldn't stand it, because you're thinking the whole time, what if they find me? I mean, I'm in really deep kimchi if that happens. But they didn't find him.
It's impressive. He just tried it just to see how close he could get and make it back. That was his only purpose.
Now I wandered in from the north fence line. There's a whole series of hills. It's run off everything else from the Groom Range. And I was about 3 miles in, and I think I probably lost 10 pounds in sweat. It was wintertime. It was 30 degrees out. The fraud that I was married to before, she was also a good seamstress, and she made, I had some of your survival blankets, the ones that day glow orange on one side, luminized on the other. And she sewed on with a quilted pattern, some infrared suppressive desert camouflage material, and made a poncho out of it. So if I heard, and it would have to be really loud because I'm really hard of hearing, if I heard someone coming, all I had to do was just pull the thing around me and crouch down into a ball. And even if they're scanning with their infrared, I would not show up.
Wow, that's great.
But I got in there about 3 miles worth, and I'm just sopping wet from sweat. I was so darn nervous. And finally, I just turned around. And every time I'd go over one of these rises, I'd see another one, and I went over 3 or 4 of them, and I said, "No, I'll never make it. I'll never survive the anxiety associated with it."
I mean, that's a commitment. Not many people would even dare to try that. So I think it's pretty awesome that you guys even attempted it.
Yeah. But to go back to the TR-3B, they're being seen all over the world, and they come in various sizes, and it could be those that are man-made would be an offshoot or a replication of the bigger TR-3Bs, because there's regular size ones and then there's super sized ones.
You think this is the type of craft that but Bob Lazar was reverse engineering? More than likely the propulsion system is the same. One of the things that Bob said in the very beginning, that the element
115,
providing the anti-gravity capabilities was element 115, and people started laughing at him. Well, that doesn't exist anywhere. Well, yes, it does. Mm-hmm. And not many years later, or I guess multiple years later, they made the announcement. Oh, we've created element 115 in the lab. It's not very much of it, but we have it. So, the element he was talking about, everything that Bob talked about, as no one can find fault with what he has to say.
Right.
There's Dave Fruhoff, who was a former SR-71 pilot and who was a facility manager at Area 51, was looking for UFOs. Said, because he said in late 72 or early 73, he was stationed at Kadena, Okinawa, flying SR-71s over Vietnam, North Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. And he was on a night mission. He said he was at 78,000 feet at Mach 2.7, 11 o'clock at night. And he's going straight. He's not, banking or going anywhere. He's just going in a straight line. Off to his left is a 3/4 moon. Off to his right, about 5 or 6 miles off to his right, 5 or 6,000 feet above him, he's getting glints off of something reflective. There were edges to it. It wasn't a round or smooth surface. The thing had edges. He doesn't know if it was metal metallic or if it was just shiny surface reflective. He contacted Kadena on secure voice to see if they had another bird up. He said, "No, you're up there by yourself." And he said, "No, I'm not. I'm going to go take a look." And he advances the throttles. Now, the SR-71 will fly at Mach 2.7 at absolute minimum afterburner. That airplane is more fuel efficient at Mach 3.2 than it is at subsonic. The airplane and the inlet and the engines, they just want to go fast. And unlike 99% of the aircraft out there, the high-performance aircraft, where your top speed is Mach 1.2 or 1.8, but the operating range is only 60% of your total
right.
capability. On the Blackbird, it flew at about 95 or between 90 and 95% of its maximum performance, both in altitude and speed. So as he's watching this thing, as he's coming up to it, he doesn't want to open up his visor. He's getting reflection inside the cockpit, even though the lights are such that they don't cause any problem going straight. But to look out the window and to look up, he's getting this reflection. He didn't want to open his visor to get a better shot in case all of a sudden he had rapid decompression. He would be toast. So he didn't, he couldn't, because the stars are up there at 85,000 feet or 80,000 feet. The stars, there's billions of them, and you could see where there are no stars, where shape was, but he couldn't see that. And said when he was still 1,000 or so feet below the object and still probably a mile away, this thing took off. Said at about a 30-degree angle of attack, and he lost track of it as it went through between 180 and 200,000 feet. When he retired in 78 or 79, he applied for a job with Flight Systems out of Mojave, which ended up being the path to his next job, which was facility manager at Area 51. And he was there about a year before he started asking any questions, because even though he knew everybody, when you're working on a compartmental program, whether it's a Blackbird, whether it's a TR-3B or Have Blue or whatever, you don't go around asking questions. You ask questions, the flags go up that maybe this guy is a threat to security. And all I had to do is pull your ticket, pull your security clearance, and you're screwed. If your entire life is revolving around having a security clearance, and all of a sudden you don't have one, that's a real good incentive to keep your mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
So he was there about a year, and after about a year, he started. He was at the club one evening, talking to some guys that had been there, for 10 or 15 years already, contractors, civilian types. Said, "Did we ever have anything flight tested out of this place that could leave a Blackbird in the dust?" And all of them said, "Nope." And he, later on, he denied ever saying what he said to me. I think he was talked to by some of the security people, and there's no positive aspects to keeping this stuff quiet. As American citizens and taxpayers, if there is a threat, and I don't see UFOs as a threat. They've been coming here since time began. And if they were hostile, if they had ill intentions, we would already know it. We wouldn't be on this conversation right now. We'd be in the lithium pits, up until you died, digging for, rare earths and stuff like that. So, but I think we may not be in the position, I'm talking about humans, we may not hold the key to disclosure. It may be them. There was an Israeli scientist said here within the last year or two that we're not ready to see the aliens, to see the UFOs. We're not ready for it yet. It's coming, and I think it's coming soon. I hope it happens before I pass. I want to see them at an open house flying over. Oh yeah, this is our sports model, and this is our top hat version. Oh, and this is the TR-3C, which is bigger and faster. And I hope to live long enough to see that. But it's going to happen. Disclosure is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Apparently, Dr. Greer has some new stuff. Michael Schratt is working for him now as an archivist and a historian. And when it comes to Michael Schratt, nobody knows the subject better than Michael when it comes to stuff that's crashed or primarily crash retrievals and crash sites and sightings. And the thing I love about Michael, he doesn't embellish anything. He's like Sergeant Joe Friday in Dragnet. These are the facts and only the facts.
Right.
And I've known Michael for 25 years now, and he's like my kid.
Aaron, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, there's been many whistleblowers over the years and decades that have said different, what we would call benevolent ET groups, have actually tried approaching our government and other governments around the world and said, hey, if you guys get rid of your nukes, stop warring, stop killing people, we'll share our technology with you and help you and eventually, disclose ourselves to the world and everything. Once there's peace on the planet, there has to be peace on the planet. They're not going to come out while we still have wars and we're still doing all these shenanigans. And basically we laughed at them and refused and said, haha, no, so then what happens is the negative groups that are like the service to self, Greys and reptilians and whatever, go down the list. They see, we can give them a little bit of technology that they, so basically they gave us this technology that we use for war and for enslaving the population essentially, and for all these negative things. And but then now they have control over us because we basically let them essentially. And then you have the story of Dwight Eisenhower, who a lot of people think he sold us out to the Greys, which in my understanding, it's not true at all. It was MJ-12. It was all done behind his back. And he found out about it, and he tried to find out what was in Area 51, what was going on. And he was denied access, and he was the president. And he was like, what?
Well, no, the president, to quote Dave in the movie Dave,
mm-hmm.
He said, a president is a temporary employee.
Right.
He's there for 4 years or 8 years.
He's a middle manager.
Right. And just because he's president doesn't give you the authority to go to Area 51. And that's pretty outrageous.
But that was news to him.
Yeah.
Because he demanded, he said, I'm going to get the first army out of Colorado and invade the base if you don't let me find out what's going on there and have access. And then, so to appease him, apparently they took him there, showed him a couple things, but nowhere near, all the stuff that was going on there. And he found out basically, oh crap, the military industrial complex is kind of gone rogue, and it's become this massive thing that can't be controlled essentially. and he found out kind of how the structure really works, and president's way down the food chain, and the whole government essentially is way down the food chain. And there's all these secret unacknowledged programs, which Stephen Greer goes into in his documentary Unacknowledged, kind of how that system works. And and they have all this advanced technology essentially that they're not sharing with humanity, and they're using for their benefit and not the benefit of humanity. And meanwhile, we're all struggling to survive.
We human beings, we may not be in control of the release of the information. They may not said, hey, you're not ready yet. You still have to do this or that. And I think that's what's holding things up. There was a thought going around for a long, long time, and I think it's still a valid idea that for aliens to come out and say, okay, we're having a coming out party, we're here, we've been here forever. I think the religious glue that holds most of civilization together is based on a belief of a supreme being, God, Buddha, Muhammad, the local 7-Eleven store down the corner that has an image of the Virgin Mary up in the sign because the thing melted or whatever, but they're not going to take it down. It's those people that could not deal with the fact that maybe Jesus was an alien.
Right.
Right.
Maybe Moses was an alien. I swear my daughter is. She doesn't think like anybody I know.
Right.
And
there's life all over the universe. It's not just
absolutely. Now I was a docent at Kitt Peak National Observatories outside of Tucson. They're about 50 miles due west. They're at a 7,000 foot mountain. It's called Kitt Peak. They have 22 optical telescopes and 2 radio telescopes up there. The optical telescopes go from about a 12-inch to a 4-meter or 13-foot primary mirror. That's the male telescope. And the 12-meter and a 25-meter radio telescope. The 25-meter is hooked into one in Australia, Hawaii, Tucson, West Virginia. And what it does is and those things are linked together. And this is over and above what they have at Socorro. And it acts as a 10,000-mile wide radio telescope antenna. So they're bringing in a lot of data. But the 2.1 meter telescope was used by Caltech for 5 years. They were doing remote operation and using adaptive optics. They had anytime they were going to be viewing, their job was to look for exoplanets, planets that exist outside of our solar system.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of 5 years, using that 2.1 meter telescope, now, because of the adaptive optics and how they adjust it, they shoot up a UV laser up in the sky. You and I can't see it because UV, but the sensors can. And at 18 miles, it has to be a specific diameter. I mean, down to the nano inch or whatever you want to call it. And what that does is the sensor looks up, and if there's any turbulence, the diameter is going to change. Not enough for you and I to see it, even if it was visible, but it does change. So 1,200 times a second, this deformable mirror changes its shape, and it has the same resolution pretty much as the Hubble Space Telescope. It's really, really good. And over the course of the 5 years, Caltech cataloged 8,000 exoplanets outside of our solar system in a very almost a postage stamp size part of our Milky Way.
8,000 planets in one little area.
One little area.
Right.
Yeah.
And just before I quit volunteering, I had ended up getting knee replacement. I'm doing a lot of walking up and down, and And I didn't care for the new volunteer coordinator, but that's neither here nor there. Just before I left, we had a beer and pizza night at NOAO, the National Optical Astronomy Observatory headquarters at the University of Arizona. And the keynote speaker was one of the head astronomers from the National Science Foundation. And he had just returned from a worldwide conference on exoplanets. And he said, based on all the information coming from all the different observatories and based on proven mathematical formulas, they calculate for every star in the universe, there's 1.5 planets. And out of that incredible number of planets, they calculate that there are 2 billion, that's with a B, 2 billion Earth-like planets orbiting a similar-sized brown dwarf star as our sun in the inhabitable zone with liquid water. To quote Jodie Foster's character in the movie Contact, Carl Sagan's movie, if we're the only ones, what a waste of space.
It's an incredible waste of space.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we're not. I mean, it'd be arrogant for us to think, oh, we're the only ones. We're an insignificant solar system in an insignificant corner of our galaxy that's in an insignificant corner of the universe. I mean, we're like the bastard redheaded stepchild that no one wants to talk to because we're pushed so far out into infinity, and we're the only ones.
Yeah.
I don't swallow that, but there are people who do. But one of the biggest fears is if all of a sudden it is the religious fanatics and the religious beliefs. If all of a sudden it's speculated and with the arrival of the aliens that maybe Jesus was an alien, maybe Muhammad was an alien. Maybe Adam Smith from the Mormon side was an alien. Maybe Buddha was an alien.
Maybe it talks about
and to remove that religious glue that holds civilizations together. Maybe they're concerned with the fact that, well, if there's no God, that means there's no hell. That means if I shoot my neighbor because he's a loudmouth or he looks at my wife the wrong way, I'm not going to go to hell. I may have to go to prison, but I killed that SOB and he's not going to cause any more problems. I think the fabric of civilized society has the potential from coming unglued. And I believe that is, because the Israeli scientists have said humans are not ready for what they're about to see.
Well, I think people are coming unglued right now. I mean, there is a lot. I mean, we talk about different subjects every week, but the consensus is like, yeah, ETs exist. We know it. And, we're getting into different races, different species, how they're working with our government. You can't ignore it. Like we can't have an ARV, an alien reproduction vehicle, without the aliens. You can't reverse engineer alien technology without the aliens. And I mean, so you can't pick and choose what you want to believe in. And all the UFO wrecks, not all of them, but most of them talk about dead bodies or living bodies that were recovered and brought to said location. John Lear talked about this in his report that I actually have sitting right here. The John Lear report has more disclosure in this report from 1987 than anything we've gotten in the last 50, 60 years. Yeah. And he talks about the recovered alien bodies from Roswell and some other wrecks and all the projects that the CIA and NSA and Project Blue Book and the government, all of those agencies developed over the years. You can't ignore any of that. You have to just choose not to believe that or choose to believe in what you believe in. But I don't, truth doesn't care how you feel. The truth is
also part of the problem is like we're in a system, we're in a society that doesn't teach us these things from day one. Growing up, we're actually taught aliens aren't real. We're the only life. That's all ridiculous. It's ridiculed, blah, blah, blah. So we're programmed as a kid from day one like, what if they started teaching us this stuff? Then it wouldn't be,
wouldn't be an issue.
Right. So they got to understand, like, the system conditions and programs us to not be ready. That's a big part of it. Like, we have to take responsibility. Obviously, like, there's religious zealots and fanatics and stuff. I used to be one, so I get the mindset. I'm not anymore. I mean, I used to be very Christian, and I used to think, oh, any aliens are demons, because that's what I was told. That's what you're taught, But, like, if I would have been taught in school, at least, that, I would have maybe looked into it. But you're taught to never look into it because it's ridiculous, because there's no evidence there's life, other than humans, and blah, blah, blah. And when in fact, there's mountains and mountains of it. There's tons of it. It's overwhelming amounts of it. It's just all covered up and hidden.
It's like someone getting a glass of water and said,
right,
okay,
there's no sharks in this.
There's no sharks or whales in here, so they don't exist.
They don't exist.
Right. Exactly.
It's asinine.
And then you have people, well, if it's true, why wasn't I taught this in school? My teacher said it wasn't true.
Why isn't it on the news? Why doesn't the government talk about it when there's actually been whistleblowers from governments that have talked about it?
I mean, one of the things that's happened, they've signed legislation has been created to protect whistleblowers.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some stuff coming out, and I think this year we're going to see some things blow up, and I think be more disclosure than we've had for the last 800 years.
Right. Even if it's the limited hangout disclosure, the soft disclosure, their narrative, it's still something. We're still making some headway. They're not going to tell us everything, but they have to start telling us something. And they already are. Look at the mainstream media now. They're taking UFOs seriously. There's whole segments on it. They're interviewing people. Obviously, it's, they're not going to share everything, like I said, but it's a step forward. At least now, I think in the coming years, it's not going to be laughed at anymore.
When I was on state staff for the Minnesota Air Guard, my boss was Major General Wayne Gatlin, and General Gatlin was just an incredible photographer. There's anything you see of a Duluth Air Guard airplane in the air, and it's beautifully positioned, the background, everything is right on the spot. More than likely, it's a Wayne Gatlin shot. So I was having a cup of coffee with General Gatlin. And I said, General Gatlin, I got a question. Let's assume for a minute I'm an officer and I'm a pilot. I'm flying F-4s out of Duluth, and I encounter and chase a UFO. Nobody else. I was up there by myself. No one else I was with saw the UFO. What do I do? How do I report it? He said, well, when you're finish your training flight or whatever the flight was, and you land, you go through your debrief on how the airplane flew. It was, were these parameters met, whatever. Then you go to the O Club, get 2 or 3 real stiff drinks, slam them down, go to your billet and forget what you saw. Because in 1955, which was the time frame that General Gatlin was pulling his firsthand information from, said, first of all, no one's going to believe you. And second of all, it's going to be in your 201 file, which means you're a crackpot, and you've just destroyed your path to promotion. So he said, you ignore it. He said, at one time we had Operation Blue Book, but it was still, it would tarnish your reputation, and you'd be viewed as a crackpot.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's all fear tactics, fear-based tactics.
So you just forget what you saw
as that.
Right. Yeah, you just forget what you saw and go from there. So General Gatlin said he chased a UFO over Lake Superior. They were on alert at Duluth Air Force Base. They were flying F-94Cs, shooting stars. Again, Lockheed. Oh, even a Skunk Works airplane, from its very beginnings, the P-80. And they were alerted to a high-speed object flying over Lake Superior. Now, Lake Superior is one of the largest bodies of, freshwater. It's one of the largest bodies of freshwater in the world. It's 1,300 feet deep, and it's at the longest distance between shorelines is almost 1,000 miles, 940 some odd miles. You don't fly over Lake Superior on military, commercial, or private aircraft because Lake Superior creates its own weather. And you could take off on a bright sunny day, there's nothing out there, and all of a sudden you can get a thunderstorm that was right out of hell, with downdrafts and lightning strikes and whatever. You don't want that to happen. So they're very cautious when they do go out over the central part of Lake Superior. But they went out there as fast as they could, and they're being controlled by Finley Air Force Station, which is on the north shore of Lake Superior, just up maybe 40 or 50 miles north of Duluth. And they're being vectored into tracking down this object, and the guys at Finley said, "Well, it's heading towards us." And General Gatlin said, he could see it. It was just a ball. It was an orb, which has been seen all over the place recently. So he went into afterburner, and the F-94C, you can only be in afterburner about 90 seconds before you run out of fuel. So he's going as fast as he can. And every time his weapons systems operator would lock on with his weapons radar, the weapons radar would die. It would, and they'd reset the circuit breakers, try it again. As soon as they locked on, the thing would die. As this thing's heading towards Finley says, "It just went right over us, but we don't have it. It's nowhere to be found." And General Gatlin says, "You're getting close enough where you can see the shore." He said, "Well, the reason why you don't have it on radar, it's directly above you." And the guys ran out of the geodesic dome. They went running out to see what was there, and this thing went straight up. Visibility unlimited. And General Gatlin said he just kept going till it was out of sight. And,
wow.
And he said, you don't tell anybody. You don't. Now he had a report there was an unknown. He never told them that it was a UFO, but it was an unknown object. And it was large enough and reflective enough to be tracked on radar.
Yeah, I mean, there's another perfect example. I mean, and it's interesting. I wonder, that was years ago. I wonder what the protocol is now, if they still report the same way.
Now, the protocol is now they do have an avenue, and that's within the last 3 years, maybe 4 years, that it's been okay to report UFO activities. Before that, you'd go to your public affairs officer and said, "Okay," and fill out a report. And that would go right into your 201 file, which means if you thought you were going to make lieutenant colonel on this cycle,
you're not.
It's never going to happen.
Right.
Because of what you just said.
Right.
So it's you're fighting two enemies. You're fighting the fact that this thing doesn't want to be seen very often, especially by the general public, and you're hamstrung by the ability that if you say something, you're going to be hamstrung. You're going to ruin your career.
Mm-hmm.
And the secrecy is very ingrained in the system of this stuff, and it's very enforced. And enforced mainly psychologically, like what you just said. Like, you'll ruin your reputation's gone. You'll never be able to get a promotion. You'll never be able to advance in your career. You might lose your career. So the silence is kept mainly by people that just don't want to say anything because that would ruin their life or their career or their reputation.
Right.
Rather than even just, and then they figure, a lot of people aren't going to believe me anyway if I try to say I saw all these UFOs or all these things.
I mean, you're going to be ridiculed.
You're going to be ridiculed, right?
You're a crackpot, and no one's going to take you seriously from that point forward.
But the more people that speak out, the more people that start speaking out and talking, then people start saying, "Wait a second," and that's what we see happening now.
It's actually the government that's the crackpot, and not the guys.
The tables are turning, right?
Oh, right. And I got to take a potty break.
So. Well, actually, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up anyway.
Okay. Was that everything you wanted?
Yeah.
You needed or wanted?
Yeah. So, if could you please, thank you for joining us for one.
Thank you. That
My
was
pleasure.
amazing.
And could you please let people know how they can find your books, where they can find your books, and how they can follow you?
I'm only on Facebook. Everybody said, well, how come you're not on Twitter and a bunch of other stuff? And I said, I piss off enough people on Facebook. I don't need another platform to piss any more off.
Right.
But I'm on Facebook. But if you want my books, I have 29 books I've written.
Wow.
27 of them are in print or have been in print. 2 of them my 29th book is at the publisher right now. And my 27th book, I'm waiting to get on an Ohio class SSGN. I have the ballistic missile ones covered, but I need the arsenal boat interiors and the differences between an SSBN, which is your ballistic missile submarine, and SSGN, which is your arsenal boat. They modified 4 of the the first 4 Ohio boats and modified them into be arsenal boats. They carry 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, plus they have 2 dry deck shelters on them, and they're a nasty war machine. And I'm just waiting to get on. And there used to be an organization called Nav something East. And it is the public affairs office out of New York City that dealt with the print media. Well, just as of the beginning of this new fiscal year, they've eliminated that position. So I'm off to other places to try to get on a arsenal boat to cover it. They can't say, well, they can't say it's sensitive. I said, I was on a ballistic missile submarine with hydrogen bombs and I shot everything. And you now have a sub with tactical, conventional warheads on it. You can't give me this crap that it's classified. No, it's not. You're just trying to protect your little kingdom or little fiefdom or whatever. But
right.
my books are, if you go into Amazon and up at the top, right, books by James C. Goodall, Goodall, just like it sounds, or Jim Goodall. And I've used both names. But James C. Goodall, you'll find all my hardbound books, which is my books on the Blackbird, on the B-2, my 75 years of Lockheed Skunk Works, and I have my submarine books, and it shows all most of my other books. But I have 29 books with my name on the front cover. Very proud of it. I hated term papers in school, and what happens? I ended up being a published author, and that just blows me away.
Well, whenever it interests you, it's different.
Yeah,
29 books,
right?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're a wealth of knowledge. I love your stories. We're not going to get these stories about Bob Lazar and John Lear and Ben Rich from anyone else. And it's good to, just like Native American lore and legend and knowledge, if they stop telling those stories, the knowledge dies. So
it dies. Yeah.
Right. So it's great that you're sharing these stories and we're getting the inside scoop and we're learning, what really happened behind the scenes in certain scenarios. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. I'll do it anytime. I'm retired, so I have a lot of free time. The wife is really good about letting me hang out in front of my computer. And she, well, you're on there way too much. I said, it's either that or I'll hang out in a bar. This way, you know exactly where I'm at. And more than likely, I'm either talking with someone about UFOs or I'm doing something about airplanes, ships, or submarines. So it's
right.
That's what I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in. We love you all. Don't forget, day passes are available for the conference. Come hang out with us. We would love to see you there. You can get those at journeytotruthcon.com. Have a great evening, everyone. We love you and good night.
You take care. And thanks for the invite.
There was a CIA director named William Colby who in the 1980s said, we'll know our disinformation campaigns are successful when everything the American people believe is fake.
When we realize how powerful we are when we set our intentions and we realize that we aren't just this, we are just these multi-dimensional light beings, and time is an illusion, and it's everything's a perception, then you can go forward and backwards and embody it and just pop out and go and do this work. We can do amazing things when we set the right intentions to do it.
And I said, this is us on this plane. That's what this is. We're going to the moon. And he said, this thing is a lot older than you think it is. And we've been going to the moon a long time. But I wrote on it, I knew that we went to the moon. And so I always knew there was a base on the moon from a young age.
And our DNA is a complex recording system of the history of the entire universe, the history, of everything, that not just this timeline that we know, but multiple timelines of reality.
There are a total of 9 different categories of planets in the universe. We people on Earth, we are living on a category 1 planet, like elementary school students. And the Theobans, they are living on a category 9 planet, like college professors. So they have been really guiding us throughout history.
Joachim let us know that this facility under the Sandia Mountain is considered an information station for interstellar travelers coming to the planet. They tell us that their facility was retrofitted into the ancient tunnel system that already existed.
And as far as the bending the space-time continuum, I've had something like that happen. And what seemed like about a 5-minute encounter has been 4.5 hours of missing time. And I was completely conscious. And when you're dealing with a type 3, type 4, type 5 civilizations that can work with the different coexisting timelines, all bets are off, man.
Every time we have Bigfoot activity out there, we're having ETs and orbs and stuff like that. We have a lot of this stuff documented. As a matter of fact, I'm a member of 3 different teams, and I work with people from all over the country out in the field. And we actually have documented a portal, something that we consider to be a portal opening. And we sent 2 of our team members inside of it. And
Really?
They disappeared and then came back out.
I would suggest that we take it one step further and say humanity has never known who we are. We've always been in the thought control matrix. And one step further, perhaps we could say that we're in a consciously controlled state of hypnosis. In other words, are the thought control matrix creators constantly bombarding us with frequencies that keep us from being telepathic, that keep us from remembering who we are? And the thought control matrix was set up, and we have never known our potential, our power, our beauty, our incredible connection.
It makes no sense at all. There is no reason for it other than the programming that we've received for generations, because it's all about order. It's all about listen to your elders, listen to the teachers, listen to the adults, listen. And what that does is it dims the light of the child, and it makes them feel like they don't have a voice. And why that's designed that way by the dark side, and that's in the system, is so that they grow up and they just listen to, and they do what they're told, and they're good little boys and good little girls, and they lose their sense of self. They lose their north, their true north. Yeah. So many adults are walking around in this world, they don't know who they are.
So the planet itself is now beginning to split. It's beginning to divide again into a higher vibrational Earth and a lower vibrational Earth. And the race of man is dividing with it. And we're becoming less and less aware of one another. And over time, what will happen, and I don't know how long this will be, one world will have all higher vibrational beings on it, and the other one will all be third dimensional beings, and we will not perceive each other anymore.